We're going to continue our series on suffering, and we're going to look at Hinduism and what Hinduism has to say about suffering. The most prominent of the 6 schools of Hindu philosophy, Vedanta Hinduism, teaches that suffering comes from ignorance. This view teaches that we can be freed from suffering when we recognize our oneness with the divine. This form of Hinduism thus says, since all is divine, there is truly no sin and no suffering. Salvation is thus through knowledge that one is actually God. A second view of suffering comes from Hinduism, and it says that from a previous life is where our suffering comes from, because we did wrong things, we did bad things in our previous life. So the Dalai Lama and Howard C. Coulter say this in their book, The Art of Happiness. In the Buddhist and Hindu models, suffering is a result of our own negative past actions and is seen as a catalyst for seeking spiritual liberation. We in this life are thus paying for the wrongs we did in our previous lives. All suffering thus has its antecedent sin somewhere. We may not understand where, we may not understand what it is that we did, but all suffering is just. This is the doctrine of karma. People get what's coming to them. What acts of compassion, though, do you expect from a system of thought, Hinduism, that says all suffering is just because it's from past sins that we committed? So Hinduism teaches karma. It teaches that we get the suffering that's coming to us. So if we deserve it, why should we help other people that are suffering? So do you think Hinduism leads to compassion for those who are suffering? Very often it does not. Think about Hinduism and the caste system. If someone was born in poverty, that's what they deserve. Why should we help them? If someone gets sick and dies of a sickness, well, they deserved it. So that's briefly what Hinduism says about suffering, but what does Christianity say in response? First, the Bible teaches that we are not divine. We are not God. We are made in the image of God, as it says in Genesis 1. And it also says ignorance is a problem, but it's not the problem. Second, the Bible teaches the decisiveness of this life. We had no other past life. The Bible says that it is appointed for man to die once, and after that, the judgment. So third, there is a judgment. People will get what they deserve. We can be assured of that. But that's not through karma. It's through Jesus, the good and just judge. It says in Revelations 22:12 that Jesus will bring justice. Fourth, Christianity places huge importance on compassion. Jesus came and suffered for sinners, and he calls us to suffer to help alleviate the suffering of others. So there is a great call for compassion and even sacrificial compassion for Christians. So that is a little bit about what Hinduism says about suffering and a little bit of a response from Christianity and an approach to suffering.